Hello and welcome back to the Empire of the Cop podcast. It's been a long time, but I've got my two good friends here, Peter Kenny Jones and Steve Carson of Flash Score. Steve, welcome. It's been a long old while. How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you. No, not too bad. Keeping up with the football like everybody else. Dealing with the hot weather, which is a nice change of pace. It has been a while. It is nice to be back, like you say.
Hotter than Mallorca is the line I've been hearing. I think my family are Southport ways, but I'd imagine it's not too much of a disparity between the two areas. Pete, how are you finding things at the moment?
Yeah, hay fever and hot. But other than that, well, looks like we're about to sign. Oh yeah, it's going quite well.
Absolutely, and what a start to the window, lads. Alexis Mac Allister, it's been closely linked with us for quite a while. I was getting a bit nervous. I don't know about you. Whenever you see these links sort of repeatedly coming out, you're like, oh God, get this done before someone, swoops in inevitably in Madrid or whatever and offers ludicrous terms, ludicrous money. But it looks like this is pretty much ready to go. We had a bit of a minor scare with Andy Naylor of The Athletic, who's Brighton & Hove Albion's correspondent, claiming that nothing's been sorted, but everyone with a stake in the story, everyone reliable from our end in terms of patch journalists, has been very clear that this is going to happen. Personal terms have been agreed. The release clause, we've been told by Fabrizio Romano, is way under £60 million. There's one source, I don't think it was Paul Joyce, I think it was Ben Jacobs actually. Yeah, it was CBS Sports' Ben Jacobs who claimed that the figure could be below £45 million. Steve, I'm going to get your reaction here because, for me, I would have taken Mac Allister at 60, maybe even £70 million, but under £45 million sounds an absolute steal for a player of his caliber and quality.
Yeah, and if that turns out to be true, which there's no reason it wouldn't be. It's a very reliable source you've quoted there. That's a phenomenal signing. Before the transfer window. Well, the transfer window isn't really underway yet, but before the end of the season, if you said what Liverpool needed, it was a midfield star, that sort of like catalyst in midfield to help the attack and flow of the game. What we've seen from Mac Allister at Brighton, and what we saw as well at the World Cup, is that he is that sort of hard-working link between midfield and attack that we've been lacking for a number of years now. I think he's obviously, you can't really compare players like pieces of fruit. It's not like I'm getting to Wijnaldum, really. It's not a case if you can get Wijnaldum and then get Mac Allister and say, oh look, they're both oranges. It doesn't work that way. But Mac Allister seems like he would be able to do that sort of role for Liverpool. Obviously, we do have to wait till he's got the kit on and he's stood at Anfield or up in Kirby, but it sounds great. Fabrizio Romano doesn't really tend to talk about something unless something is genuinely happening. So, yeah, exciting times, particularly Paul Joyce as well. That was really where I took notice. It was earlier today, Monday morning, that he tweeted out that Liverpool are looking to get it finished this week, and if Paul Joyce stamps his name on it, you can pretty much just take it to the bank. It's you could almost say right now it's a done deal. I think once you hear Paul Joyce, someone of that caliber, talking about it, something's checked behind closed doors, and it's on its way now, and he's exactly the kind of player that we need. And for the price that you're saying there as well, the potentially lower than £45 million, yeah, like you say, £60 million is probably about what he's worth, maybe even a little bit more. He is a World Cup winner, that's not easy to forget. And a phenomenal player for Brighton as well. It's no accident that he's having a phenomenal season, and so are Brighton. So it is really good to see us interested in those kinds of players. Obviously, I think it will be a little bit disappointing for Brighton fans if we do manage to steal him for about £40 million. But, this is just the nature of football. It can be a little bit like that sometimes. Look what happened with Erling Haaland when he left Borussia Dortmund. Obviously a footballer that's worth probably in this market about £200 million, and Manchester City managed to get him for, he's already repaid it back by the trophies that they've won this season with his help. So, hopefully we can see a little bit of that ourselves in Mac Allister. But yeah, I mean, aside from signing Jude Bellingham on a free transfer, I'm not sure how we could do too much better than getting Mac Allister in on less than £50 million.
No, absolutely. I mean, Pete, you sort of hear the figures there and the achievements at Brighton. He's been an integral part of that sort of midfield that's also contained the likes of Moises Caicedo, Pascal Gross, guided them to European football, won the World Cup and was a key part of that World Cup winning squad with Argentina. I think the interesting thing that sticks out for me really is Steve sort of alluded to the similarities with the former Red and Gini Wijnaldum. He's got attributes, as rightly, not a carbon copy of that player, but certainly attributes you'd look at and think, if Klopp wanted to use a player like that again, Alexis Mac Allister would be that player. Certainly statistically, we've seen comparisons, and that's probably as close as you're going to get in today's market. Certainly for me, if you look at sort of where Liverpool are going, you've got Cody Gakpo's coming in January. The comparisons to Firmino we've seen, it seems like players that we're going to miss and players we have missed, Liverpool have been very quick in the market to ensure that we're plugging those gaps.
Yeah, he's definitely an exciting player, isn't he? As you say, it is a bit strange that we can get him that cheap. We think Brighton, what they were after for Caicedo in January, they were wanting 70-odd mil, and when we first started getting linked with Mac Allister, they were saying similar price for him as well. But if he is 45 mil in and around there, I imagine there'll be add-ons with that. But then it's one of them. The add-ons are normally if they get so many assists, if they win this cup, win this trophy, and then you're happy to pay it then because it means they've been a success. So yeah, it's definitely an exciting move. I was looking there, he played 35 times last year, which in the Premier alone. So that shows he's maybe a lot more durable than midfielders we're used to. Scoring 10 times as well, which again is not something we're used to from midfield. And obviously, when you say Wijnaldum, he came from Newcastle as a winger, come midfielder, and he definitely was chipping in with goals and assists for them. But maybe Mac Allister won't be having as many goal contributions as he has at Brighton. But they're a very good side. They never sell for cheap, so it's almost worrying that we've got it that cheap. Is there something they know that we don't, or as this new bloke we've got in? I don't even want to attempt his name, George Schumacher. I've just attempted it, so I lied. But the German bloke, is he that good? Is he just sort of a boss deal? I don't know what's happened, but yeah, as I said, it's nearly worrying how well we've done in that transfer. But we know from Michael Edwards that it can happen, and maybe we're going to find another summer where we do pull off a few good deals, and then it makes more sense why we did pull out of trying to sign Jude Bellingham, because if we can get 3-4 players of the quality of Mac Allister for the price of signing Jude Bellingham and make our whole squad better, more durable, more competitive, then yeah, it's a no-brainer really. I think our attack is sorted, our defence maybe needs a little bit of tweaking, the keepers are fine, and midfield qualities there. It's probably just the strength and depth we need, because we've said goodbye to Keita, Milner, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Arthur Melo, if you want to count them. And you've got to replace those people, haven't you? So it's a great first step, and we're just excited for what else follows, really.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're right to mention the durability, and that was certainly one of, I think, when we're speaking of Wijnaldum, his most prized sort of attributes. I've just got up Mac Allister's sort of injury record at Brighton, and over the entire course of his playing career with the Seagulls, he's only missed 4 games. 3 of them, you'd argue completely sort of out of his control. It was a viral infection. The other was a back injury. But realistically, he's only really missed a single game for Brighton his entire time there at the Amex, which is absolutely, phenomenal. I think we're looking at I think Wijnaldum had a availability rate of something between 95 to 96% in all competitions for Liverpool Football Club. This is the kind of player we really need to be pursuing, Steve, isn't it? Because it's you look at the injury history of Naby Keita, of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain after that highly unfortunate injury against Roma in the Champions League. Even players, Thiago Alcantara, phenomenal world-class talent, but simply not as available as much as we'd like him. Jordan Henderson, Fabinho, 32, 29 years of age respectively, aren't getting any younger. Question marks over whether they can do it, especially do it over the course of the Premier League season, domestic cups plus European football. Liverpool need a midfield that's built to last, really.
Yeah. I think the main thing that you mentioned there, and it's a theme whenever talking about Wijnaldum, but that availability is that's really what you need. It's, you can look at the careers, the players that you've mentioned there are great examples, Naby Keita and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. Obviously these players on their day showed that they have the ability to play for Liverpool. They were not out of place playing for Liverpool, but it was the injuries that let them down in the end. And for the most part, these are things that are out of players' control. And in certain cases, it is particularly like heartbreaking. Like you look back and sort of emotional careers of footballers like Daniel Sturridge at Liverpool. He's got a bit of a cult hero / legend type status. But if he was able to stay fit the whole course, then he's going to be revered probably maybe a touch more than Luis Suarez. Obviously, I'm not talking about ability-wise. Suarez is on a different planet, but I mean in terms of just how they're revered at the club. But yeah, availability being as scarce as it is at Liverpool at the minute. Thiago is another good example that you've given there. Obviously, again, when he's available, phenomenal footballer, one of the best central midfielders in the world. I don't think anybody can argue with that. The things he can do with a football is just it's so rare to actually see a footballer play with that level of class. He just oozes on the football pitch. It's very Xabi Alonso-esque, a little bit Iniesta sometimes. Obviously, like you say, he's aging a little bit now. He's getting on. There are obviously a few rumours that he might sort of fancy a move elsewhere, which really does further emphasise the need for a player like Alexis Mac Allister or someone of that availability and ability-wise. So, yeah, I mean, the injury record is really promising, and it wasn't something I'd ever really taken into account. But, yeah, I certainly hadn't remembered a time when Mac Allister had been out for a length of time. So, yeah, I mean, being able to rely on a player is so important, especially for Jurgen Klopp. And I think we've seen that. Jurgen Klopp is loyal, perhaps to a fault sometimes, but he will give players chance and chance again. But ultimately, like we've seen with Naby Keita, if the injury record persists and he cannot rely on you, he will begin to phase you out. And ultimately, here we are where Naby Keita is leaving the club. Obviously, a talented footballer with a lot to offer, but injuries have really sort of hampered that. Whereas, Alexis Mac Allister coming in with the injury record that he's got, very promising. He could hit, if he hits the ground run at Liverpool, obviously there could be an embedding process, like we saw with Fabinho, like we saw with Robbo, and like we probably would have seen a little bit more with Darwin Nunez, if not injuries in other departments this season. I think the future could really be good for Mac Allister at Liverpool. Obviously, I think we are in a position now where we can talk about this being a near certainty of coming to fruition now. So, yeah, he's exactly the kind of player that we need in terms of being able to pick up the ball from midfield, link up the attack, a bit of creativity, like Pete said, bit of a goal scorer as well. We've struggled having midfielders with an eye for goal over the last few years, that's where like the Oxlade-Chamberlains and the Naby Keitas have come in, because they do have that eye for goal, but the injuries have let them down. And it's just an unfortunate part of the game that, that kind of thing happens. But, thankfully, it doesn't seem like that's going to be a problem with Alexis Mac Allister. And I think, it's going to be one of those signings where it will be, even though it's, it's difficult really, because the nature of the market is that a £45 million signing can feel shrewd, which is weird, but it does feel sort of shrewd. Like Pete alluded to, the fact that, we're getting a player of his quality and for that price, it is very good. And it is sort of symptomatic of like Liverpool from a few years ago, when we picked up the players like the Wijnaldums, we picked up the Robertsons, we signed these under market value. They've come in and they've, sort of taken on a new breath at Liverpool. And yeah, I think Mac Allister's showing all the right green flags for that to be something that, he can find at Anfield.
I want to pick up something on quickly that you said there, Steve. But first, we of course, Empire of the Cop got in touch with Football Transfers Jacque Talbot, discuss all the latest names and stories being linked with Liverpool Football Club. Everyone from Manu Kone all the way through to Frankfurt's Daichi Kamada. Let's hear what he had to say. Hello and welcome to Empire of the Cop, the podcast. We're back again. It has been, I want to say a brief hiatus, but in actuality, it's actually been quite a while. My colleague, Peter Kenny-Jones, has been holding the fort for me, but I'm back, and I'm back with a very, very special guest. We have football transfers, Jacque Talbot. Jacque, how are you doing?
Yeah, really good, thank you. I'm doing good. I'm missing football already, to be honest. It's only been 3
aren't we
weeks,
all?
but I'm already like, where is it? I'm just want another major tournament or something for the summer, but we've got nothing apart from transfers, which is
I know.
in itself, isn't it? So yeah,
I know, it's relentless, isn't it? Even with the names we've sort of come used to seeing from a Liverpool perspective, the odd one sort of gets chucked out into the ether, and you're sort of wondering where on earth does that come from? Speaking of which, I have him at the bottom of my list, but it seems right to begin with him here at the start, and that is Daichi Kamada. 26 years of age from Frankfurt. I believe his contract has expired. Pretty good season in the Bundesliga by all accounts. 16 goals, 7 assists in all competitions. I believe you covered a story originating from Calcio Mercato, looking at Liverpool potentially wanting to swoop in at the 11th hour and seal his signature. It makes sense financially, but I don't know about you, but I think personally it's one of those that I can't really see Liverpool going for just as a terms of general age profile. I think we've got that weird situation in our midfield where we've got loads of really experienced but old players, and then the likes of Bajcetic and Carvalho, and who are all sort of 18, 19, 20 or so. So we need, I don't know, that sort of sweet spot, effectively the Mac Allister age, really. It's a 24 or around that sort of general gist.
It's a strange story. He came out of Italy. He's about to sign for AC Milan, and then an Italian outlet who Calcio Mercato can get some stuff right, but they're not the most reliable, but they can sometimes usually when it concerns Italy, they get it right. But they've just come in saying, oh, he's Liverpool liked him. I think he's just going to get wrapped up at Liverpool, and then like his agents told a couple of their reporters, like, just to get a bit of a better wage that Liverpool are interested. He would be free. And I imagine his wage would be relatively minute. I don't know. I mean, in terms of like, Premier League football player, not for like me or something like that. But a free transfer, probably, I don't know how good he is really. I know he did quite well in the Bundesliga, but like my colleague Ronan Murphy, he specializes in Bundesliga, and he said like, he's not good enough really for Liverpool. So it's probably a bit of an on-start of that one. But yeah, it's supposed to be relatively good in that league. I'm not sure why he's leaving Frankfurt. I thought they're doing really well. They won the Europa League the season before last and stuff. And now everyone just wants to leave. I feel a bit sorry for him, to be honest.
No, it looks like there's going to be quite a sort of few exits from the Bundesliga. And I think one that plenty of Liverpool fans are kind of hoping for, having looked at the highlights reels, certainly, is that of Gladbach's Manu Kone, one of.
I thought you were going to say Bellingham.
Yeah,
Bellingham. I was like, oh, it becomes Bellingham.
It's like, oh,
you'll leave that. We're going to go through one podcast without mentioning Bellingham, I guess. But
I know. We were so close. We were so
close
to not mentioning Bellingham. Yeah. There we go. His name's up. It's out there. I can't do anything about it. But yeah, no, Manu Kone. Deemed by some as the alternative for Jude Bellingham. Well, there you go. I was going to mention him anyway. 22,
Twice
22 years of age. Twice, no, that's it. This podcast is officially cursed by the spirit of Jude Bellingham. But 22 years of age, a very, very promising player. The one thing that comes that's come through to me from various people I've spoken to is that obviously plenty of really sort of promising attributes, but I think inconsistency can be a bit of an issue with him, but you can kind of understand that with players of his age. He has turned up for the big games. I know, course aside, Christian Falk was talking about him and sort of saying, he's played an absolute blinder of a game against teams like Bayern Munich, so you look at the quality of the opposition there. So he's definitely got the attributes to succeed. It's just a question of whether whoever gets him can coach out that sort of inconsistency. Interestingly as well, Liverpool.com reporter Bence Bocak had an exclusive with one of his old coaches and noted who noted that the player came into training all these years ago wearing a Liverpool top. So he's apparently a massive Liverpool fan to boot. So, you know, you can see the sort of the checklist sort of forming in sort of Liverpool fans' minds. Obviously, you've extensively reported on the player. It's sort of one of the names, along with Khephren Thuram, who you've pretty much were first to as far as Liverpool's interest was concerned. I suppose my question to you is how does this look like it's going? Because I get the impression Thuram seems a little bit more further ahead as far as sort of initial discussions are concerned. Whereas Kone, it seems like the club are active, they're involved, they're looking into it, but it doesn't seem quite as far ahead.
Yeah, Kone, they had, even like last summer, asked about him, and there were like a fair few Premier League clubs on the table for him. Like even like about 10 of them. And obviously, like, he's done well again this season. I know you mentioned there he's a bit mercurial, his form. He's still a little bit raw. I think he's certainly not as I mean, I don't watch Bundesliga, Liga much, but just sort of from scoping articles and stuff, it seems that he's probably not quite the level yet as like Thuram or something like that. But he's, someone I had discussions with in January. I think obviously nothing came into fruition in terms of them bringing another central midfielder. And then it's sort of come up again. And Liverpool at the table, and you know, Liverpool and Newcastle are battling for so it's Kone and Thuram. I'll leave off Thuram for the time being, but I think Newcastle's interest is actually quite heavy in Kone, which I'm quite happy about because we've been linked to Scott McTominay. So whatever like that. So yeah, no, for Kone, it's certainly one you admire, and I think there's other reporters talking about that as well. When you report talk, I've said this before in my channel, like when you report talks, it's like, it's quite common. It's not like talks of a player, especially in the sort of post-COVID age of Google Meets and Zoom and stuff, you know, having preliminary meetings with agents and the player alongside. It's relatively normal. It doesn't give a huge indication of interest. It gives an indication of interest, but not to a huge degree. So, you know, he is certainly one of, say, like 7 targets, I'd say, Kone. And as you mentioned there, the sounds are a bit more about Thuram being a bit further ahead, and, you know, his father in particular pushing for the move, and things have advanced that I heard. It's the last thing I heard about Thuram there. I think that's the one Liverpool fans really want as well. But again, Newcastle was in for him as well. But for some reason, Newcastle recruitment seemed to be pushing for Premier League players like Scott McTominay and stuff. Anyway, so yeah, Kone, as I say, you know, quite raw still. I think 35 million euros is what we reported in January, somewhere between that. It's all dependent on the amount of proposals on the table. Whether that'll go up, obviously, if there's 20 clubs going heavy for him, which is quite unprecedented, then it'll go to like 60, 70 million. But, you know, 35 million pounds, euro would get them at the table. That figure was ratified by Sport Build, I think, this week as well. So relatively cheap, I suppose. High ceiling, 22 years old, ticks a lot of boxes. Probably a bit more of an element of risk with Kone, though, in terms of like getting off the mark straight away than Thuram.
No, absolutely. It's interesting, obviously, because it's the same age as Thuram. You know, slightly more expensive. I think the figure that's been thrown around is at roughly sort of 43 million pounds, which is, I think, quite a lot for a league-on player. But you're looking at sort of the caliber there, and you can kind of understand sort of where they're coming from, and you look at the developmental sort of potential there. So it makes sense. And obviously, you've reported for Football Transfers that talks are advanced. PSG are interested, but I believe they want to pay installments, don't they? Which sort of complicates matters for them. In terms of the context of sort of Kone and Thuram, do you get the sense it's a very much sort of an either-or situation for Liverpool? Or is it more sort of they'd be keen to snap at both Frenchmen? Because, I mean, they're also supposed to be relatively close friends as well, aren't they? So you've got that sort of aspect, which you'd think would make a certain amount of sense.
Yeah, no, I do. I've been sort of reluctant to sort of say that because I think to a degree people go like, well, where are they both then if they both don't come? But I would, you know, I'd imagine Liverpool are looking to overhaul the midfield. You've got Chamberlain leaving. I know this is not direct players. Milner leaving. They're going to need to bring in some fresh blood. So I certainly believe they'd be open to bringing both players in. Mac Allister looks like it's pretty much there as well. But I don't know whether. But again, it's like whether what the transfer market's like. It's like there could be the intent to get both, and then it just turns out to be one, or it could just be none. But I'd certainly put much more like credence into Thuram coming than Kone at this point, because I think even like other Premier League clubs might look for Kone. But yeah, certainly both of them. I believe that they would be like, we've got Thuram, we won't go for Kone. I don't think that'd be the case. I think it would be both. Yeah, for sure.
Lovely stuff. And one name we were certainly discussing right before we had some trouble finding the right pronunciation for was that of Feyenoord's Orkun Koku, highly rated by Liverpool's scouting department. But I think you were discussing on your personal YouTube channel about potential. I mean, we know how thorough Liverpool can be with their sort of character assessments. They're not just looking for value and for talent. It's very important for Jurgen Klopp that he can build a close-knit squad. I think there are some concerns over potentially even his sort of political views. I believe it's somewhat right-leaning, if I've understood that correctly.
Yes, it's something that was flagged to me in a reply, and then I sort of like scanned it. It's something I don't want to say it because might be defamatory or something, but there's some sort of, so he's been involved with like extreme right-wing politics to some degree, and it was more speculation on my part. It seems to be something that, as you mentioned, the sort of recruitment department have sort of got high up on the list in terms of analysis and data. But obviously we know how Liverpool are, it's not just about the talent and stuff, because you can have all the talent in the world, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be conducive to how the club operates and to the philosophy of Liverpool, which has been part of the reason of why you've been so successful recently, I believe, under Klopp, is having a new sort of philosophy and blueprint and stuff. But he's still among there. As names being looked at. Relatively cheap, I think, from Feyenoord, 22 years old. I mean, it's probably one where it's just maybe they'd have I haven't heard of talks or anything like that. I've heard only of like admiration, particularly from the sort of analytical side of things and his numbers and how he would fit in, and I think people have got to, like, Liverpool can't just go, oh, Bellingham. I know I mentioned Bellingham for the third time, but Bellingham. I can't help myself.
That's four now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can't just go like, oh, yeah, so Bellingham. Oh, we're going to get Koku now. And everyone's like, who's Koku? Like, Premier League clubs have to do a degree of appeasing fans with, especially if you're a Liverpool, Man United. And Liverpool aren't as guilty as this as Man United. I'm not saying that, but if you're a big Premier League club, you can't just go. Liverpool can't just kind of do in Brighton. They can't just go to the right this season. I know we missed out in Champions League, but we're going to go scout the Ecuadorian like Division 2 to see if there's any like gems there. Like, people would blow a fuse, like just getting like 4 players for like 3 million. Do you know what I mean? So there has Koku. That's a bit of an extreme example, but Koku, they can't just be seen to get him. They need to get a Mac Allister in as well as Koku and that. So I feel that if Koku was to be done, or that anything else was to accelerate, it's my personal opinion that you'd see probably a Mac Allister and another signing before you see Koku. I don't think it'll be one that will be like wrapped up like in the next 2 weeks or anything like that. It's one to keep an eye on, which is something that all transfer like journalists say, one to keep an eye on. I hate that phrase, but it is like, it's like yeah, the names there, they certainly liked. It could just dither into nothing, or like, I think they'd have to get in like another sort of like a Thuram or something, and then Koku would come in after, would be my guess. Yeah.
One to keep an eye on. It's an awful football cliche, isn't it?
Oh,
in the journalism sphere.
And they call them gurus as well. Transfer guru. Yeah. It's like, what does that mean? A guru? It's like some sort of like sex expert or something, isn't it? Like a guru. And like, yeah, like one to keep an eye on is just like, it's a cliche that's unavoidable or something, isn't it?
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I can't talk. I find myself writing it at times. I'm just, need to take a shower after.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's one to watch. It's only
one to watch. Okay, yeah. Lovely stuff. Well, another name we've sort of been advised to sort of keep an eye on. It's quite interesting. So Southampton's Romeo Lavia. Obviously, Southampton have been relegated, but I believe they're still pushing to get decent money for the player. It was one of the names that you sort of exclusively revealed Liverpool were tracking as far back as March earlier in the year. Interestingly, Liverpool insider Paul Joyce mentioned his name, Ryan Gravenbach and Khephren Thuram, when discussing players that Liverpool are actively tracking. Interesting, given he chose to omit Kone. What's the latest that you've been hearing around sort of Lavia, and do you know how highly he ranks compared to the likes of Thuram and Kone and even Coxu?
Yeah, no, I think with Lavia again, it's kind of similar to Koku in that there's an admiration for him. I mean, even the Telegraph said I think Newcastle are after him. I realised I've mentioned Newcastle a lot in this as well. I don't mean to. Bellingham and Newcastle, just to get rid of them. So yeah, with him, I think he'd just be someone. I think his age, and this is just a bit speculative. I think his age, he's 19. It's still quite young. So the report we did in him, we broke the initial interest in late March. We heard a bit about maybe because the figure Southampton want £50 million is their asking price. It won't be 50 million. It'll be somewhere nearer to 40. Maybe even less than that, to be honest. But there was a suggestion that maybe someone like Tyler Morton would be one who they can sell to the Southampton, who are in the Championship, to kind of subsidise the overall fee for that. It's sort of a fleeting idea we sort of put out there that we heard and sort of relayed. But again, it's a sort of an admiration. I can't imagine that. I think it'll be you're more likely to get sort of like Thuram, Kone than Lavia at this point would be my guess. But yeah, there's certainly interest there. The only reason I say I guess is just because I just feel with such a pivotal season coming up, like Lavia, maybe if you've got Champions League, and I'm not saying the ship is in the wrong direction at the moment, but there's been a bit of a dip, and I just wonder, with the inexperience he has, like, would that dissuade them? But saying that, he has had like a really good Premier League season. He's been a star performer for Southampton, despite them being relegated. Like, he is tremendous. So, yeah. But as of like hearing more, no, nothing recently.
No problem at all. We have to keep an eye on the Morton situation. It's one of those with Tyler Morton. I think he's an incredibly sort of talented player, but you look at Bajcetic's season, and Mac Allister's obviously positionally versatile, can play an 8, not 10 as well. So I might be too many cooks in the kitchen there from my point of view. But have to see what Klopp fancies.
Yeah.
One name I'm very curious about. We've heard plenty about him, but nothing quite so concrete. Is that of Bayern Munich's Ryan Gravenbach, formerly of Ajax, known to be admired by Jurgen Klopp, one of the players that Paul Joyce specifically name-dropped in his report when discussing Mac Allister's impending move. Didn't get that many minutes at Bayern this season. I think it was something like 900. Might have been under 900, actually. I don't have the precise figure here in front of me. Again, one of those incredibly sort of talented players. You get the impression regular minutes, the right coach could really soar into the stratosphere developmentally. Is this one that you could sort of see Liverpool looking at? Because I've heard, obviously, Tuchel is meant to be having talks with the player at some point to try and convince him to stay. But as things currently stand, I don't think Gravenbach's particularly inclined to stay. You look at some of the players that are coming in. Konrad Laimer, Bayern is said to also be interested in Declan Rice. If I'm in his position, I would certainly be a little concerned, given that his playing time was already restricted to begin with.
Yeah, would you say 900 minutes? So that's less than 10 games, isn't it? That's 10 times not. Yeah, to be less than 10 games, which isn't a lot. They put him from Ajax only last season, and he was like the real deal at Ajax. And then he's gone there, and he hasn't had the games. He's still relatively young, but I think his talent certainly warrants a bit more. His name's been linked for a long time, actually, by Liverpool, hasn't it? It's nothing. I don't think we've exclusively heard anything on that. It's all been out there already. And what we saw was a lot of reports, I believe, right from Germany saying Liverpool were interested, and then there's been other ones of like Bayern flexing, saying we want to keep him for another season, which could be true, but could also be a good way of like raising his value a little bit, because obviously if a club goes, yeah, we're happy to see him go, so then it's going to be like, well, okay, here's 10 million, like, do you know what I mean? But if you say, oh yeah, we're keeping him, we want to keep him here, and then the club, it could see the club bid for a higher amount kind of thing. But also, you mentioned there's sort of a new manager coming in that can change things. Tuchel likes him and stuff. Maybe there could be a way in there, and that can always like deter like the direction it's going in. I think I saw like 20 million euros around like for him, which would be incredibly cheap. I can't imagine it being that low, but certainly if Liverpool made like a 35 million pound offer, maybe that'd be something that Bayern Munich can say no to, especially if the player does want to move away, because you don't want an unhappy player. Again, it's probably another one that's just sort of have to wait a month or so to see what happens or whatever. Like after Tuchel gets comes in, I think Liverpool probably looking at their sort of major targets first. Like Mac Allister's about to come in, isn't he? And then as the season goes on, like if there is an opportunity to do a deal such as Gravenberch, then that'll happen as well. But then I think they will get like 3 midfielders this summer.
Lovely stuff. I'd certainly imagine that much of the Liverpool fan base will be happy with 3 completely brand spanking new midfield, and then you can sort of stick all that sort of experience right neatly sort of around it as and when you need it. Last name I've got on my list. It was a name that was heavily linked with Liverpool for quite some time. I think, everyone was almost convinced he'd be ending up with us. As it turns out, he's going to be ending up at our rivals, Manchester United, potentially. Instead, of course, nothing's done and completed, Formula One clips aside. That is, of course, a Mason Mount. It's an interesting one for me because I think you look at sort of Paul Joyce's report, and he's talking about nothing particularly new in terms of Liverpool's transfer window will be determined by price and the availability of the targets they're pursuing. That's pretty much been our modus operandi since Fenway Sports Group have taken over. We've exceptionally spent more when we're bringing in exceptional talent. But you're looking at sort of the price tags that Chelsea want for a player who, is leaving in a year. And I understand there's extra around this. He's an academy player. It's about sort of what sort of message they want to send with these sort of talents. But you think 80 million, United apparently value him at 50 million. Is that right? Is it the case just that sort of price is coming the way for Liverpool here? Or is it just more the player just fancies United, Champions League football's there? It's a more exciting project for him personally.
He probably would have been offered, it's the personal terms that have been done first. He probably would have been offered a bit more, in terms of personal terms than at Liverpool. And obviously Champions League is also a factor as well. I mean, I know you're a Liverpool fan, most people disagree, but for me, in terms of like club size, you kind of flip a coin of Liverpool, Man United. It's about the same. And if one's in Champions League and the other isn't, then, you can sort of see that, and maybe he was offered a bit more money. In terms of like the price that Chelsea have set on him was £80 million, which is quite incredible. It's if Man United weren't at the table, and that was it, and it was August 20th, and Liverpool made a £40 million bid for Mason Mount, I think they would have accepted it, and I think it'd be going. From the sounds I've heard, is that Chelsea have flexed a lot on this, in that they are kind of not happy to see him go, but they're putting up a bit more of a wall than they're letting their reporters know, in like, we want to, it's a shame kind of thing. Like, I think they know he's going, they know he's going to leave, and all they're trying to do is extract maximum value for him by saying 80. They know they're not getting £80 million. They know they're not going to get £80 million for Mason Mount. No one's paying that, but they have to publicly say it's that much, because they know the interest for Mason Mount's not going to dwindle. It's not some like niche player or anything like that. It's Mason Mount, England international. That interest is always going to be there. Someone's going to make a move, so they've said £80 million, which is ridiculous. But then you get Man United going, well, okay, maybe not 80, but we think 50. How about 60? Let's shake hands on that, and then let's go about our way. £60 million for a player who hasn't played many games at all this season, who is refusing a fresh deal, and whose contract is into the last 12 months. But that's how you play the game with them. Mason Mount, talks had been underway as far back as I think as December. And I can't remember when you played them at Anfield. I think it was in a domestic cup. I could be wrong. And I think I think there were some conversations that took place there and stuff, and things were like in place there. And, the project had been sold to Mount a long time ago, but Man United come in, Ten Hag pushes it, and then it happens. But what happened? Who's the Real Madrid midfielder you missed out on last summer? I can't remember his name.
Oh, Aurelien Tchouameni.
Right. With him,
Yeah.
he was supposed to come, then he went to Real Madrid. And apparently Liverpool don't, people are going to rip, but they don't, Liverpool have been careful not to like let that happen again, where a target goes and they have no one. They have no one there because they did it last time. And they did it this time round. And that's why we're seeing Mac Allister get done so thoroughly, because that, similar to how Mount was, Mac Allister has, like, they've done the selling of it. They've done the legwork. I think even Paul Joyce said they've been doing the legwork of this to get someone like him in. So basically, Mac Allister was always there as a bit of a fall guy for Bellingham kind of thing. He was always there in case Bellingham did go, actually, I'm going to Real Madrid. And they did something similar with Mount as well, but I'm not sure quite who's in place. I mentioned before about Mohamed Kudus as well. And that could be one that comes in for Mason Mount. But I think they certainly wanted that sort of number 8 certainly sealed off. But the legwork was done with Mason Mount. But obviously it just, his head was turned by Man United, who came in strongly. And I don't think there's many other clubs he would have knocked you back for. Really, I don't think Newcastle could have allured him. I don't think, obviously, Chelsea couldn't have because he was doing bad thing there. Arsenal maybe, but yeah, Man United just got that, haven't they? And I feel it seems like your fans are quite not too concerned about that anyway. Really, Mason Mount not coming, they're probably bigger fish to fry. I don't know what you feel about him.
Yeah, no, I think it's. I've got a group chat with some of my sort of current and former colleagues who are all Liverpool fans, and I think we're very much of the mind that we're quite happy with Mac Allister. I think we'd have taken both Mac Allister and Mount if the opportunity was sort of presented to us. But I think we're quite sound with Mac Allister. I think it's a shame how it sort of ended up. I think you can understand, because I look at it very much as we'd be getting the player not from this season, but from the prior season. He was absolutely tearing up, had absolutely ludicrous sort of goal contribution numbers. That's the player I'd see Klopp or Ten Hag or whatever coaching back to his best. Young there, was relatively quite durable actually before his surgery. So again, we'll have to see how that sort of plays out. But yeah, I'm of a similar mind as you. I think 80 million would be absolutely insane.
They don't care. Chelsea, they're trying to buy football clubs to see players come in. They see that, they're trying to buy Sporting Lisbon. You've not seen that about Ugarte. There's a report saying that Todd basically offered to buy a stake in Sporting Lisbon to see the player come in. I don't know how true it is, but it just made me laugh. Their moment.
It's one of those you think has to be false, but you would not be you would not be surprised to see the Athletic sort of come out and go,
everywhere. That's the thing. It's actually everywhere.
Yeah.
But
it's bonkers.
They're funny. £80 million for Mason Mount. I don't think that's just going to stick, is it?
Not to mention Bellingham's name again, but you think Madrid are paying. What's the figure? It keeps changing.
Somewhere less than 90 million, wasn't it? The installments came up to about 120. It's much less than what Dortmund were claiming they wanted, as normally happens anyway. They flex. We want $500 million, and it's like, well, we end up accepting. I know it wasn't $500 million, but it's like a lot less kind of thing. But yeah,
that's the thing. You look at the player. Not certainly not to disrespect Mason Mount, but you argue Bellingham is the better player with the higher sort of talent ceiling, and you think, there's going to be a difference of, you could be paying almost 20 million less. Like that doesn't seem right.
5 years.
No.
That's a huge part of it as well, certainly. So yeah. Mason Mount, to see what he does at Man United. I don't even thought they needed number 10 because they've got Fernandes, but I could be wrong. I don't know, unless he plays him at number 6 when he's 4-2-3-1. I don't know. But to replace Ericsson. Anyway, enough Man United chat on this.
Yes, enough. We mentioned Man United and Bellingham far too many times for my liking. I'm going to need to go home. I'm going to need a cold shower after this. But Jack, thank you very much for that. It's been highly informative. Plenty of stuff on Kone, Thuram, Koku, Lavia, Gravenbach, Mount, and Daichi Kamada. This has been the Empire of the Cop podcast. I've been your host, Farrell Keeling. We've had the lovely Jacque Talbot on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And welcome back to the Empire of the Cop podcast. So you heard there from Football Transfers Jacque Talbot on everything to do with Liverpool transfer stories this summer. Manu Kone, Khephren Thuram, Orkun Koku, Romeo Lavia, Ryan Gravenbach, Mason Mount, and Daichi Kamada. But I just want to go back to what Steve was saying previously about Liverpool sort of years before, going for these kind of players, the sort of the deals that you look at initially, like Johan Aldams, as you mentioned, Steve, where you sort of look at that initially, and I think we all sort of saw it from coming from Newcastle, about £25 million, I think it was. And we sort of thought, not doesn't blow you, out of the water really. But you look back at certainly his career, and Liverpool being that one player Liverpool have missed in midfield, durable, would pay off the tactical debts of his teammates. A perfect character, really. Jurgen Klopp loved him. I think would have quite liked to have kept him for another year prior to his departure on a free transfer. And it very much seems like Liverpool are calling on the sort of older years here, especially for me with the addition of a former Wolfsburg employee, Jörg Schmatke. We seem to be heading into this route of bringing in a sporting director who will say no to Klopp. I've seen plenty of reports, Pete, looking into this, plenty expressing concern that he's a bit of a hothead, sort of says what he's thinking without a filter. For me, that excites me. I don't know. I very much look back to the years when we had Michael Edwards, and you have the story of Klopp being interested in Julian Brandt, Michael Edwards stepping in and going, no, you want Mohamed Salah. I'm quite excited about the prospect of having a sporting director come in and, agree with Klopp by all means when you agree with him, but step in and say no when you think there's a better option out there.
Yeah, but, I think there was rumours before he arrived, wasn't it? He was going to retire altogether, and he's only on a 3-month contract. So I think if you've only got that amount of time, you're probably going to try and stamp your authority on the club, aren't you? He's either we couldn't find anyone, and he was the only mug who said yes for being here for 3 months, or he was so good that we go and you know what, if you can only do 3 months, we'll have you, and let's hope it's the second option, and that he is, as you say, he can stand up for himself, and he should have a bit of expertise definitely in Germany. We were linked with Mac Allister before he came in, so that's probably something we had in the pipeline. But with the likes of that Manu Kone, and he obviously has got a good amount of knowledge of the country that he spent most of his career playing at and managing and being a sporting director. And so, yeah, hopefully he can stand up for himself. We've seen the stories of him throwing chewies, Julian Nagelsmann on the bench and all stuff like that. He sounds like a bit of an eccentric character, and we know Klopp's the same, don't we? So, yeah, hopefully those two different outlooks, they won't be butting heads. They'll be, creating the perfect storm, and yeah, we'll end up with some really good finds that can match the likes, as you said, like Robertson and Wijnaldum, who we've got on good deals before and gone on to be, great of the club.
No, absolutely. I mean, Steve, what side of the fence are you sitting on this? Were you blown away at all by Schmatke, or was it one of those that you sort of thought Liverpool probably could have got a bigger name, or where are you sitting on this one?
I mean, for me, it was just a case of when the news come through, I just thought, that's a nice little bit of spice getting thrown into the mix. It's just going to be that sort of like a little bit of a shake up. Sort of like people saying there in terms of just the backroom staff really. And yeah, he seems like a bit of a character, which is good. And yeah, behind the scenes, not to accuse anybody at the club who's ever done this, but you don't want yes men just sitting around Jurgen Klopp, because nobody's perfect, and like you said there about Julian Brandt, obviously great footballer, but given the option of him or Salah, it's no comparison, So it's definitely going to be good to have a mind like that behind Klopp, and yeah, like Pete's saying there about the short-term contract, there is a little bit of me that hopes maybe that's because Liverpool are geared up for a massive summer, and that was just sort of like, we'll get you in for short-term basis, we're going to overhaul this summer, one last hurrah, and then you can go and off to the sunset and do whatever you want to do, and you can just watch the players that you've brought to Liverpool hopefully excel and do well over the next few years. And yeah, I mean, I'm excited at the prospect of a secondary rebuild under Klopp with a bit of a fresh take. And, if Mac Allister, as we've talked about a fair bit here, is the first one through the door, then that's great. I'm also interested to see the likes of Kone and Thuram and take it from there. I mean, more midfielders is definitely something that we need. So but yeah, I mean, it's a case of just wait and see what happens. But I think it all sounds very positive at the minute. It's all been positive at Liverpool, to be honest, for the last few months. After the World Cup restart, it was a bit of a staggered restart for us. But since then, it's all been pretty positive, I would say. I think we're moving in the right direction again, which is good. I think we stagnated slightly, but I think we are in a good position now. I think it's going to be a good summer.
No, absolutely. I mean, obviously you brought up Manu Kone, and obviously the big thing about Jörg Schmadtke is, of course, his experience from the Bundesliga. He knows the league inside out. He will know who the rising stars are, who will be the sort of ideal targets Liverpool want to look for. That typical kind of Liverpool target on the verge of soaring off into the stratosphere, but not quite there yet. So we can get them bag them at a nice price and develop them and turn them into world beaters, courtesy of Jurgen Klopp and his coaching team. What kind of play, Pete? Are you quite happy for us to sort of, do the Schmadtke approach, sort of focus on the Bundesliga, see what sort of value we can extract from there? Obviously Kone is the big one from Gladbach. I think by all accounts, reports seem to suggest not quite anywhere near sort of far along as our interest in Khephren Thuram from Ligue 1. Is this something you're quite happy for us to do, sort of look at the Bundesliga?
Yeah, but it's better what you know, isn't it? It's not what I know, but it's what our man from Germany, George Schmacher, will learn it eventually. Whatever he knows best, and we should trust him. He's only there for 3 months, and he said before he's going to want to go on what he knows already, isn't he? He's going to rely on the knowledge he's already got. We can't expect him to come in the door on 4 days ago on the 1st of June. He's leaving in September. And to start scouting players and to start finding the right... he needs to have an idea already. And if he's been in that league and spotted them as, a player, I think, again, he played 30 times, I think, in the league this season. So he's definitely been someone that there's enough game time to watch him. Again, durable. And maybe he fits in the Wijnaldum role in that, again, he's not a goal scorer or assistant. And like every other midfielder, we've got really just someone who can give a bit more legs and energy to us. And that's definitely what we need. Jordan Henderson's game was always running everywhere, 100 miles per hour, but doing it in a clever way and exhausting their team and forcing them into mistakes. And he's 5-6 years older than he was when he started doing that for us, so he's obviously got to be slowing down a bit. Fabinho is more to sweep it up, and Thiago doesn't run as much. Harvey Elliott maybe not the quickest, so we do need some engines in there to do the running for everyone else. And as I said before, our front line is arguably one of the best in Europe, if not the best. So it's all going to be geared towards giving the ball to them, giving it to Trent, giving it to Robbo, and just trying to get the ball in the box. And that's what we need, some box-to-box midfielders who can run for 120 minutes for us. And by all accounts, he looks like the type of player who could do that. But, I'll be honest myself, I've never heard of him. So I can't be going mad about him. But as always, if Klopp says yes, then you think they're the right man. And, there's enough people doing the research behind the scenes that if they think they're the right men, and we've got enough of a track record, I think pretty much every signing we've made other than Naby Keita has been a good signing. And I don't think Naby Keita was even bad. It was just the price of him, which made it seem worse. So we haven't had many duds. So whatever we're doing, keep doing it. It's just we've got to get the numbers in. So with him, it'd probably be another one on top of that as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, speaking of the Bundesliga, Steve, obviously seen plenty of links between Liverpool and Bayern Munich's Ryan Gravenbach. Story that seems to have relatively quieted down. We get the impression, of course, that the player's not happy with his playing minutes. I think he registered roughly around 900 minutes for Munich this season. I think he's slightly enamoured with the interest from Liverpool, but obviously Tuchel will want to have talks with him, see if he can pin him down for another season and promise him some more game time. How that works out, given they're bringing in Konrad Laimer and allegedly want Declan Rice's, we'll have to see how that plays out. Do you think for Liverpool it is the case of sort of looking at sort of Kone and Gravenbach, or do you feel that sort of any other sort of Bundesliga players that Liverpool should really be looking at?
No, those two certainly stand out. They fit that sort of profile of up and coming players. Gravenberch there, as you're saying, there's been talks for a while about interest from Liverpool in him, and it makes complete sense. There's a history of sort of fringe players at Bayern Munich that have left and made stars of themselves elsewhere. It's just a case of they're very similar to Manchester City in that they can kind of like build two starting 11s. And some of the players on their bench can go to other teams and, become some of the best players in that league. I think Gravenberch is probably in that bracket. And if he is a little bit disgruntled over in Munich, then it could be a great idea, because if he's only had 900 minutes, the equivalent of about 10 games per season, but obviously most of those will be substitutions. I think you can almost guarantee that he'll, have twice the amount of that playing for Liverpool. We do like to rotate our squad often, and I think James Milner, even in later years, was still able to get near twice the amount what he's getting over there in the Bundesliga. So he's an exciting player. Even before the move to Bayern Munich, he was an exciting player, and as soon as he went there was a little bit of hope that. The bit of hope that maybe Liverpool fans had, because he's been linked with Liverpool for a number of years now, and there was a bit of hope that probably diminished when he went to Bayern Munich. Like, a big team's got him now. That's probably going to be it. He's going to develop into a world beater. Off he goes, like Goretzka when he went there. But if they are interested in other midfielders, it seems like he's the kind of player that would be let go, and we could get ourselves a good little deal there. And I'm sure Liverpool, especially, under the ownership we've got, will be looking for little cheap deals here and there, especially when, as Pete said there, we need to be bringing in numbers this summer. We need to be padding out our midfield. We need to bring basically a new midfield and a new backup midfield almost. Obviously, utilising players we've already got, like Curtis Jones, Harvey Elliott, Bajcetic, Jordan Henderson, not to disregard them, of course, but we do need to bring in a number of players, and, those two that you said there, outstanding footballers on the up, and they could come into Liverpool. They wouldn't be expecting to be starting 11 straight away. I think they'd be pleasantly surprised by just how much football they do play under Jurgen Klopp if they decide to come to Liverpool, and if the clubs can obviously agree to facilitate that.
No, absolutely. I think the thing is, for me, it's a question of numbers as ever for Liverpool, isn't it? We know we need at least two midfielders. Ideally, we need three midfielders coming in this summer to completely rebuild things. And then it's a question of, right, well, can we afford to do all this business plus everything else that we're looking for? There's been plenty of talks about, do Liverpool need a fullback to come in and fill Trent Alexander-Arnold's slot if there's going to be a position for him in the midfield or not? Again, that's a tactical discussion I'm sure the club are having behind the scenes. Do we need another centre-back? Given that, Joel Matip and Joe Gomez can be unreliable at the best of times. Do we need a backup keeper, given that Kevin Kelleher rightly will be looking for more first-team minutes? So the numbers do add up for Liverpool. And obviously you've got Paul Joyce, who's recently come out for the Times when he was confirming the progress of the Mac Allister deal, saying that it's very much the case for Liverpool of who's available and how much they cost. I'm obviously not breaking any new ground there. That's pretty much been Liverpool's modus operandi since FSG first came in, Pete. But are you confident that Liverpool will be bringing in three midfielders, given the reconstruction that needs to happen around the squad? I mean, you look at the numbers there. If we're getting in Mac Allister for £45 million, I think Manu Kone is said to be valued at around £34.4 million. Khephren Thuram, £43 million. So you could rebuild the entire midfield for roughly around £100 million, which is pretty good value for money, you'd say. Are you confident this will be a three-man midfield job, or do you think Liverpool will ultimately reach a point where they have to compromise regarding the other work they need to do around the squad?
Yeah, well, I got crucified a bit last year when I said we didn't need a midfielder. But my point I put across was the amount of people that we've got, and I still think we have got a lot of options. So Fabinho, Bajcetic, Harvey Elliott, Curtis Jones, Henderson, Thiago. Am I missing anyone? I'm sure that's 6. And then we've got Trent, who can now play there. If we sign Mac Allister at 8, you only play 3 at a time. So that's still that's still 5 sat on the bench or not in the squad at all. And then if we're going to sign any more, you have got to think about what we do with the players that you've got. And I think Klopp said that before, and no one would have expected last season that Bajcetic would be a serious option, but we saw him. He started against Real Madrid at home, and he was getting into teams on merit, wasn't he? He wasn't because of injuries. He was definitely in there. And Fabio Carvalho, we don't know what's happening with him, but he looks like someone who could also play in that midfield role, like where Harvey Elliott does. We've also seen us several times play 4 up front, where we only actually needed 2 midfielders playing, where Cody Gakpo drops in deeper. So I think I definitely expect us to sign more, but there has to be a point where they have that chat. If everyone's fit, that's got to be the end goal, that we always have everyone fit. And obviously, you plan for things not happening, but if we have 6 months where we don't have any injuries, touch wood, then we're going to have a lot of unhappy players. So it's that fine balance, isn't it, of how you have the right amount of players for if you do have an injury crisis, but also that you can rotate it. And hopefully the Europa League might even be a blessing, that we do have a good injury record for once, and we can play all these players there. But it is going to be a balance. We've got rid of Oxlade-Chamberlain, Milner. Who's the other one we got rid of? Arthur Melo and Naby Keita. So that's 4 players that we thought we needed last season. So you'd think that they're going to bring 4 in, but I don't know whether Trent and Bajcetic have changed that. So I'd expect 2 or 3 to be what we sign, and then we go and try and get a centre-back to compete with, when Matip and Gomez are needed, and probably in the likeliness that Matip goes next season. So maybe you get a young one. You've got to trust Calvin Ramsey as the right back, and I don't think there's too much more else we need to do there. But maybe that's me being overly optimistic. We did just come 5th, and we want to win the league, so maybe we do need to sign a couple more. But it's a lot of things they've got to juggle and balance, on top of the fact that we famously don't spend lots and lots of money on transfers. So I don't know. I'd say 2 more midfielders, a centre back, and I'd be happy on top of Mac Allister being there as well. But it could be more, it could be less.
I mean, you've mentioned Bajcetic and Trent there inverting from the right back role. You could argue even Curtis Jones certainly comes into the conversation with his performances in the last round of the season. Certainly played a big part in our sort of late winning streak in that left central midfield role. Was absolutely phenomenal. He's on a new tailored training program, which means hopefully won't see any more sort of stress fractures anytime soon, and he can be consistently available for Liverpool, because absolutely there's a footballer there. Klopp's been saying it all along, Steve. And he's right, as it turned out. But is it the case? Because, I mean, Pete raises a really good point there. Liverpool, I suppose we run into the trap of saying, Liverpool still have a lot of numbers, but then equally, are we confident in those numbers taking us to a title, taking us to European glory, taking us to domestic cup competitions? We know obviously winning the lot is an extremely difficult task, and Liverpool came so close the season before. Last 2 games of the season, 2 domestic cup competitions you win, but you've got to look at sort of the quality of those numbers and think, well, Fabinho, can we trust him to be consistent? Henderson, we certainly probably shouldn't be looking at it as a reliable starter over the course of the season. And again, as Pete rightly mentioned, there are question marks over the sort of Fabio Carvalho can be trusted to do that, and what the club are looking to do with him, whether they're going to loan him. Can Harvey Elliott be defensively reliable? But then this comes into conversation with, how is Klopp going to set up tactically next season? Will the right central midfielder be required to be as defensively astute as Jordan Henderson would have been back in the day? Is this how do we strike a balance here?
I think there's a lot of difficult decisions and a lot of difficult conversations that need to be happening at Liverpool. Football players like Jordan Henderson, like James Milner, command a lot of respect. Of course they do. And he's going nowhere. But you look at Jordan Henderson and you wonder whether he's at the level where you could have him in a title-winning midfield. Obviously, a couple of years ago, of course. Now, maybe he's more of the James Milner role. There could be a difficult conversation that needs to be had there. Maybe it's already been had, to be fair, because he has seemingly reduced slightly in his role over the last season. So maybe it's already, Jordan Henderson, he's not an idiot. He knows these kinds of things, and, he knows the path that he's on. Of course he does. He's not just a mindless drone. And then you look at the Thiago as well, and you wonder his injury record. And if a good offer comes from, say, Barcelona, do Liverpool go, well, Mac Allister's coming in, we're going to bring in 2 or 3 more, because we don't know what conversations are behind the scenes. There could be a big whiteboard with loads of names on it, and we don't know. Liverpool might want to sign 2 of them, but then if a good deal comes in for Thiago, we go, well, we could sell Thiago for 30, and we know X club will sell Y player for 30. So, well, maybe it wouldn't be 30 for Thiago. That's a number plucked out of the sky. We could then get this player in, and he's going to be more reliable. He's got in the next 5 years, he could develop into this, and it's going to be even better because of X, Y, Z. There's loads of things behind the scenes that we don't really know. I think that there will be, as I say, some difficult conversations at Anfield. I think certainly a lot of pride will have to be sort of put down slightly. I'm hoping that we see a reprise of Fabinho, because we've seen flashes of Fabinho this season, and I think, it was an excuse we used at the beginning of the season, but it went on too long to really justify it as a legitimate excuse for the whole season. But obviously, season before the one just gone, we played the maximum number of games. Our players were knackered. We don't have 2 11s like Man City. They were ruined. Obviously, the length of time that went on, I don't really know if we can use it as an excuse, but I think that's part of the reason why we've seen a drop off in certain players like Fabinho. They were just simply didn't have much left in the tank. So hopefully this season, being as lackluster as it was, hopefully it gives the players a little bit more sort of thunder for next season. These players that sort of fell off slightly. So we'll have to see what happens with the likes of Fabinho, and as you both pointed out about Fabio Carvalho. There's talk about him sort of maybe potentially leaving the club. We'll have to see. We don't, again, as I say, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. As far as we know. Carvalho's a Liverpool player. He's a young Liverpool player. He played quite well last season, so let's just assume that he's going to play a role next season too. Yeah, the likes of Curtis Jones as well, Harvey Elliott, these are promising young footballers. And I think, some people are too quick to write off these young players sometimes when they don't perform at like generational standards. You look at the likes of Trent, you look at the likes of Phil Foden, you look at the like Saka, and these players are obviously, they would improve any other team in the league. And then Curtis Jones comes through, and because he's not Phil Foden or the next coming of Steven Gerrard, I think some people are a little bit too quick to judge him. And I think towards the end of the season, he really did show people that he does have something about him. Jurgen Klopp, obviously, as you've said, Farrell, Jurgen Klopp knows that there is a player in there. And I remember a number of years ago, there was an interview Steven Gerrard gave where he offered Jurgen Klopp a piece of advice indirectly. And he said, if you want to just stick to any player, Curtis Jones, just stick with Curtis Jones. He will always give you 110%. Now, obviously, things change and all that, but I think you could rely on Curtis Jones to, at the absolute least, play what Lallana's role was in the last couple of years at Liverpool, in that he can come off the bench. He's that sort of sparky player, and he could make something happen. We've seen him come off the bench and make things happen. He has that about him. So, the jury's still out on a number of these players, but yeah, I think in the regards to the Asian players, your Hendersons and Thiagos, I think there will be some difficult conversations to be had. But James Milner is an example of what Jordan Henderson could do over the next number of years. We'll have to see what happens there. But yeah, we need to obviously inject some youth into the midfield. Alexis Mac Allister is a great start point. The likes of Kone and Thuram, other quality young footballers. But we've got our own ones as well. Like Pete says, we don't need to go out and sign 10 midfielders. I think if we do accept that Henderson has a reduced role, maybe you've got to look at in the future, you start sort of maybe gearing up the likes of Harvey Elliott or somebody like that to play that role. And yeah, if Thiago moves on, you need to then think, right, okay, we need to bring in a player that has that creative spark. Maybe that's going to be Alexis Mac Allister. We don't know. Jury's still out on a lot of these things, but yeah, I think there's going to be a bit of a midfield sort of evolution this summer, and I think we're going to see some big changes. And it's the area where it's needed, because, like Pete said, up top, phenomenal footballers. In terms of having 2 front lines, 3 players interchangeable for another 3 players, phenomenal. Defenders, great. Alisson, one of the best in the world. Midfield needs to be evolved, so we'll sort of see how it goes. But yeah, I think there could be some difficult conversations at Anfield.
A lot of difficult decisions to be made at Anfield throughout this summer window. Liverpool have a lot of work to do. Steve, you mentioned evolution there a lot, and I think that's pretty much sums things up for Liverpool. But it's been a step in the right direction with Brighton and Hove Albion's World Cup winning midfielder Alexis Mac Allister, 24 years of age. Very, very exciting talent, and hopefully a sign of how the club needs to go on through this window. You've heard Manu Kone, you've heard Khephren Thuram mentioned. Who do you think should Liverpool sign this summer? Should it be 2 midfielders? Should it be 3? How careful should we be acting in this summer window, bearing in mind the talent that we've got in the squad currently, as Pete rightly mentioned? If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to give us a cheeky like, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. This will also be posted on Substack, where you can get involved in the community and share your thoughts with us here at Empire of the Kop. This has been Peter Kenny-Jones, Flash Scores, Steve Carson, and I have been your host, Farrell Keeling. Thank you for joining us. Take care.